Hey guys, welcome back to We're Talking Movies. This is Cade, and today I am joined by a returning guest for the channel, and that guest is my dad, Rich. And for today's discussion, we are going to be revisiting a series of our favorite action films from the 1990s. Hey Dad, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. So, before we get into our five favorites, first we're going to be going through some honorable mentions. And by the way, this isn't going to be a ranking or anything. We're just going through these movies by the years. First up, we have Hard to Kill from 1990. Dad, you definitely have more to say about this movie than I do, so go ahead.
This movie is fantastic if you like Seagal. 1990, Steven Seagal, cop, family gets killed. He's in a 7-year long coma. He wakes up and he's going to go kill everybody. That's the movie. Couple of fun catchphrases. He's going to, go against the mafia and bad politicians. It's a great movie. Great. And I mean, the kill ratio compared to a John Wick movie is probably pretty darn close.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Hard to Kill is that it's one of the few Seagal movies where Seagal actually takes hits, because he almost never gets hit ever. When in this one, when I finally watched it and you saw him take hits, all I could think was, whoa, what the hell's going on? Is this a Seagal movie? And you actually see him take hits and everything. And not super often, but it was just kind of surprising. So that's part of what made this, I think, stand out from a couple of other Seagal films.
Young, tall, skinny Seagal.
Yeah, and this movie also has possibly one of the funniest yet cringiest lines in any action movie. I'm going to take you to the bank, Senator Trent. To the blood bank.
It was fun. And it was, for the time, for 1990, it was a pretty aggressive movie. And it's probably the number 2 all-time Steven Seagal movie.
Yeah, behind Above the Law.
Exit Wounds.
Exit Wounds, that's right. Okay. All right, well, moving on from Hard to Kill, we're talking about Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Now, personally, I would have put this in our top 5, but our top 5 had to be ones that we both agreed on. So luckily, we got this into honorable mentions. So yeah, I think Terminator 2 is fantastic. I really like the concept of the T-1000. Linda Hamilton's great. I love all their dynamics with each other. You have John, you have Sarah Connor, the Terminator, as an ally in this instead of an enemy. So that's what I enjoy about it. And honestly, a lot of people say, Titanic is James Cameron's best movie, but I honestly think this is his best one. I know a lot of people might disagree with that, but Dad, you know what? What's your relationship with this movie?
I still like the first Terminator OG much better. People like this probably because it flows better. The action's really good. The whole liquid metal part, especially for the time when CGI wasn't really great and figured out yet. This movie definitely had a ton of that. All the robotic stuff with Arnold. It was impressive for the time. All of the back stuff. I loved that Arnold is there playing the Terminator that's helping them, and the whole time Linda Hamilton just wants to blow him up. I think that part was actually funny, and it made it fun for the movie. It was good.
But it's still not better than the first one for you.
No, not at all.
All right, I understand. Well, moving on to our next one, we're going to 1993. We have Demolition Man. So it's an interesting movie, I'll put it that way. It's funny, it's ridiculous, it's kind of all the things that you want from, I guess, a 90s action film. And you know what? We were just talking about this. If you look back, this movie actually has a pretty decent cast if you think about it. I mean, there's Stallone, Sandra Bullock, Benjamin Bratt, there's Wesley Snipes, there's Bob Gunton, and even Dennis Leary's in this movie too, and he's kind of a fun character in it.
I love this movie. I remember when it came out, and it's campy, and
it's just meant to be entertainment.
It is. And the characters were great. I mean, Wesley Snipes was phenomenal as Simon Phoenix, and all the jokes and all the, the punchlines in between before he kills somebody. Simon says die.
Or that scene when he's trying to get the guns and someone walks up and goes, "Fellow greetings, sir. What seems to be your boggle?" My boggle?
Yeah, all the lines were hilarious, and then you've got Stallone, the caveman, compared to the modern society, and then you've got a man from the previous bit of society. I thought it was kind of fun. The movie is fun. The rapport between Sandra Bullock and Stallone is excellent. All the little goofy taglines and all the stuff. I mean, if you haven't watched it, this was tough for this to be an honorable mention.
Yeah. Well, now moving on to the next movie, we have GoldenEye. The first movie with Pierce Brosnan. So, Dad, I have a question. Before we really talk about this movie, when you heard that Pierce Brosnan was going to play James Bond, after 2 films with Timothy Dalton, what was your reaction when you found out that he was going to take the role?
For the time, you were kind of like, finally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, I mean, you had... So James Bond needs to be a suave Brit. Guess who that guy is? Pierce Brosnan. And when you found out that Bond was going to be recast, everyone was like, finally, Brosnan is the walking epitome of what James Bond should be.
Of all 4 movies that Pierce did, I think this is probably the best one because they started to get a lot more campy as the way went on. And the thing I've noticed about this movie, regarding the plot, you have Bond going up against a former MI6 agent, Alec Trevelyan. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, but I think traditionally James Bond films have been villain driven. It was cool to have a character with a little more depth.
This is also the movie that introduced us to Judi Dench as M. And I actually really like Judi Dench as M. I always like, whether it's the Brosnan era or in the Craig era, I always liked her dynamic with Bond because you can tell that she doesn't really like him. Is she the best M ever? I mean, that's probably a debatable thing, but I did always like her dynamic with Bond, is the best way to put it.
She understands that Bond is a necessary evil.
Yes.
What she does a really good job of is showing her struggle with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the dynamic, and that I think she actually admires what he does, even though she doesn't like him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's even that scene when she goes, well, I think you're a sexist, misogynistic dinosaur. Yeah, she clearly doesn't like him. But again, like you said, she knows he's a necessary evil. So that was something that I think was good.
No, the writing is very good at making that fun. It's like, I hate you, but I kind of don't.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think it's one of those deals where you're like, I hate you, but I wish I could do what you do. You know, I don't know. That's the way my brain sees it.
Well, and this movie also has, I think, one of the better female James Bond villains with Famke Jensen playing Xenia, because there's the whole thing where she and Bond meet and she's trying to just crush him with her legs and everything. And she's kind of a fun character to see him be a little flirtatious with, but also at the same time, they're trying to kill each other.
Yeah, and I've never really loved her as an actress, and I think that's one of the few films that I actually really liked her in, because the character was fun and evil at the same time. But I really liked her in this film.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that concludes our honorable mentions. Now, moving on to our top 5. Starting off, we're going back to 1991. We have Point Break. Yeah, so this is one of the films on this list that we have with Keanu Reeves, because he was kind of one of the kings of action films in the 90s.
Pretty much. I mean, when you think about all the movies that he was in, because I think at the time, everybody kind of thought of him as Bill and Ted and didn't think he could actually do a serious role. I really feel like that is true. And to do this, I mean, look, it's the 90s, it's the early 90s. It's funny because this movie's funny because they're trying to be serious, but it's not really that serious.
Like, it's pretending not to be campy, but it kind of is at the same time.
But it kind of is. It's the federal agent, former all-star quarterback in college.
Because if you think about it, he's probably the worst person to send undercover, because when he's on the beach, people start recognizing him from when he was in football. And yeah, he's kind of one of the worst people you can send
But it
in.
gave him cred. That's the thing. It gave him street cred when he was out there. So that was the cool part. And with this movie too, I love movies personally that are very cast driven. And the cast in this movie is fantastic. I mean, look, you got Keanu, you got
Patrick Swayze,
you got Laurie Petty, Gary Busey's in this movie. And then just reach out, you know, when you start digging into it a little bit, the cast is really good, and the characters, it was good. I mean, some of it, you know, it was a little overacted, and back in those days, it was hard listening to Keanu try to be a surfer dude.
Well, and one thing that I've always liked about this movie, I've always loved his dynamic with Patrick Swayze. You know, the rivalry between these two guys, definitely, but they also have a great chemistry. I love it when the protagonist and the antagonist both have great chemistry with each other, but the rivalry still feels strong, and I think they played off each other really well.
They did, and the other thing is it almost felt the dynamic was done later in Fast and the Furious with Paul Walker and Vin Diesel. It's the same kind of dynamic where Johnny knows knows he needs to take him down, but he likes him.
Like, he forms a very friendship, brotherly bond with him too.
And watching that internal struggle with this guy's kind of teaching me about life, and watching him, you know, struggle and deal with that while, you know, it's all going on. That's the deep dig into the movie. At surface level, it's fun, you know, go get the bad guys, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. This movie's fun.
And, you know, despite that, the movie's not perfect by any means, you know.
No.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, you were saying earlier, you know, it pretends not to be campy when at times it is. I mean, if you look at some of the writing in it, when some of the other FBI guys are going, hey, like, totally rad, too. Or when Gary Busey is on the radio going, hey, is that quarterback punk partner of mine shown up yet? Or when he's with Bodhi as he's about to go surf his last wave, and he goes, vaya con Dios.
And it's so bad because it's so awful the way he's sounding it out. You're like, oh my God. It was like, it took you back to, hi, this is Bill and Ted. I was like, oh no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, and I think the performances overall are pretty great. I've always really liked Gary Busey in this movie. I just think his character Pappas is kind of funny because he's obviously the more seasoned FBI agent, and at the same time, he's also like not the best agent that you can come across. Because I mean, there's that one scene where he's just in the car while the ex-president's robbed the bank, and he's just reading a newspaper, but he's still an entertaining character, so that's something I appreciate.
Yeah, it was like they were trying to make him like an old school cop, but they kind of, Keystone copped him too, made him a little, made him funny at the same time. Like I said, there was some good rapport and some comedy mixed in with all of the seriousness of it.
Yeah, totally. Well, moving on to the next movie in our top five, we have Speed from 1994. So I want to say this about Speed. It might not be a super deep plot or anything like that, but the concept is actually pretty interesting because you have these people trapped on a bus and it can't go below 50 miles an hour and you just can't stop at any point. And here's what's cool. I don't know if you've ever had this experience as an audience member, but it almost feels as if we as audience members are kind of trapped in this bus with them and it becomes very claustrophobic. And I think that's part of what keeps the movie thrilling because you want to see them get off and it almost feels we're kind of trapped in here with these guys. You can really just feel how tense it is and everything.
Because they keep going back to the clock.
Yeah.
Every couple of minutes, and it makes it was the one great thing about this movie is how immersive it is.
Yes.
You are just sucked right into this because it feels, when they joke about live action, we are at live action because it's happening right now. You're in it, just like Cade was saying. You're rolling with the movie. Okay, we've got 27 minutes. We've got this many minutes, and it's rolling, and
it keeps moving at a very fast pace, which is nice because it keeps you invested in it too.
And it was one of those things where, like I said, immersive. That is probably the best. Like if I had to have a one word description, it was immersive. You were just you just got sucked into the vortex, and you're on that bus.
It's even kind of comedic at times too, where he steals that car and then he just smashes the door off when he hits the bus, and the guy in the passenger seat goes, "Oh, you just wrecked my car!" And it's tense at times and it's thrilling, but it's funny how it can also work really well when it wants to be funny.
Yes, it definitely was all that. And like I said, I haven't seen the movie in a long time. I remember it well, and it's one of those things where I just liked it. I liked how engaging it was.
Yeah, and something I notice about it, it's another, like we said, it's one of the Keanu films that we have on this list. And something I notice is I honestly think that this has one of Keanu's better performances. I think he's honestly better in this than he was in Point Break. I think you can definitely tell how dedicated he is, and you can tell that he's really trying to do something with it. So that's what I like about it.
Well, the problem with Point Break versus this is you have to listen to him do that bad surfer lingo where he's actually being a normal person in this. So I think it sets it apart and makes it a lot of different. It shows some versatility on his part because it's, like I said, I really enjoyed this movie from like I said, the suspense part.
I also really like his dynamic with Sandra Bullock. I think they both played off each other really well. And I think she's good in this movie too. You also have Dennis Hopper in this movie as Howard Payne. And even when he's monitoring the bus, waiting to see if he needs to set the bomb off and everything, there are times where he's just so freaking menacing in the movie. And times where he's just so over the top and comedic, and it's just kind of funny to see that switch with him. And I think he does it really well too.
He does, and for younger audience members, Dennis Hopper is a great actor.
Yeah, he's definitely a great actor. And also, I think, talking about what the concept of this is, how the bus can't stop and everything, I have to say, the action sequences in this movie are actually pretty great. When you see the bus just tearing through all the cars, especially there's that one sequence where they have to jump that gap in the middle of the freeway. And I mean, is it kind of ridiculous? Sure, but it's still executed really well. So that's the thing that I think works about it.
That was probably the only part of the movie I hated.
I mean, I don't love it, but I think it's executed well.
Yeah, it's executed, but it's like, seriously, come on now. Because what I hate about that part of the movie is you could have cut it out and it wouldn't have made an ounce of difference in the movie. It added 5 seconds of suspense, but that's it. And it really didn't add to the movie. I guess that's my 2 cents. Could have done it. Could have just had a road with a car in the way and smashed through a car. Then it would have been fine. Wouldn't have changed one thing. Add a little suspense, but it's like, hi, this is not remotely...
That would not happen.
Remotely actually possible.
Yeah.
I don't mind reality being stretched a little on things like that, but that was borderline ridiculous.
Well, and also, even the train is another element that makes you feel like you're trapped in something and that it's also moving at a very fast pace.
Yes.
Well, now that we're done with Speed, now we're moving on to the next movie. We're going to 1997 where we have Face Off. So before we really talk about this movie, Dad, I don't think I've ever asked you this. What's your opinion on Nicolas Cage and John Travolta as actors?
I think this was probably one of Nick Cage's coolest roles. This movie is so fun in the weirdest action movie kind of way, just because of the whole face swap.
Well, yeah, and getting into that, what I was saying about speed. I mean, I don't even think the concept of this movie is bad. It's actually kind of interesting the way that it swaps faces, but not just faces, also, makes your body look the same as someone else too.
Yeah.
So it's got an interesting concept.
When it came out, I thought it was cool. The cast was really good. Again, I think the extended cast on this was pretty good. I think it was Gina Gershon in this, right?
Yeah, Gina Gershon's in this.
Yeah,
too.
she was awesome in this movie. I thought that Travolta and Cage played off of each other unbelievably well. That's the part about it that was so good is the way those guys work together. It was so good.
Well, also, this movie can definitely be very over the top at times, as a lot of people know. That one scene where Nicolas Cage is stuck in the prison and he's just beating up the other person or going, "Hey, I'm Castor Troy!" And it's freaking hilarious. It's ridiculous, sure, but it's definitely entertaining. And I think part of it is because of Nicolas Cage.
I've never been the hugest Nick Cage fan. Most people like his deep movies and stuff.
Like Leaving Las Vegas.
Yeah, and Con Air. I remember him when he was young and he was in Valley Girl in the 80s, which he was a goofball in that movie. And he was awesome. I love guys who can play a badass well. And I just thought he was fantastic as a badass in this movie.
And he also has the golden guns, which are pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those deals because it really should be a sci-fi movie and not just a regular action movie because of the stuff in it. Because they've kind of pushed the limits of reality a little bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All the stupid crap with the guns and all the bullets.
When they're jumping in the air and just firing at each other.
Yeah, it was a little bit of stretch of reality and stuff like that, but it was fun. And I feel like if you look at the movie that way and not try to take it super seriously, accept it for what it is. It's fun. It's a shoot 'em up game. It's a shoot 'em up game movie. You know what? When you think about the intent of the movie, I think that's what you have to kind of look at is you have to say, what's the intent of this movie? This movie was to see how many bullets they could shoot in 2 hours and have a little fun because it was comedic. That was the fun thing about the movie is it's sci-fi-ish, but it was serious at times. It was comedic at times. There was love story mixed with action and all this kind of stuff all thrown together. And it just kind of worked.
Yeah, and just, we talked about Nicolas Cage, but also with Travolta, this might be really unpopular opinion. I think this is one of his better performances in movies, actually. A lot of people say Pulp Fiction is one of his best performances, and yeah, I can agree with that. I think he's pretty good in that movie, but I think he's also good in this because you get to see him play a protagonist and an antagonist. At first, when he's Sean Archer, he plays that side really good, but then when he's supposed to be Castor Troy, he switches to villain so effortlessly, and I think he is a good actor. I think, he gets too much hate, but I think he is good at what he does when he has the right material.
I think he's a great actor. He's super versatile. Look, because of your age group, you can't appreciate John Travolta.
I appreciate Travolta.
No, it's different because you didn't watch Saturday Night Fever when it came out in 1976 or whatever the heck year it was.
Or Grease.
Grease, whatever. I think Grease, Saturday Night Fever just shows to the versatility of him. He's a super versatile actor, and I think this was probably, I'll say it's an underrated role for him. I can definitely say that. This movie's really good. Again, this is one of those things where I loved it. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's so funny because for me, this movie, Nick Cage sticks out way more than Travolta. Even though I like Travolta in it, Nick Cage stole the show.
Well, and it's kind of same thing, I think. What I was saying about Travolta, Nick Cage, I think, also does a good job because in the first half, he's just this absolute freaking lunatic terrorist guy, but then he switches to Sean Archer really good. And
his eyes are all big and he's acting all emotional. It is really good. I think for both of them, it's probably, I would have to think it's probably one of their more difficult roles to have to play two characters in one film.
Yeah, and I think there's actually one scene in this movie where he's just with Castor Troy's crew and he's really high, and then he looks in the mirror and he just points the gun at it.
It's I can't even think of the
Symbolic.
word right now. Yes, but also it's basically you're struggling, because you have to be the person you hate.
Yeah, that killed your son.
Yeah, so I mean that I think that's the problem is now you have to be what you hate more than anything in this world. And I think that part of the movie was probably the best struggle, I guess, when you're watching is you're seeing them deal with the duality of each of their lives.
There's even that one scene where they both point their guns at the mirrors when they're on the opposite sides of the wall, and you see his reflection, which is what they're actually supposed to be. And it's a creative part of the movie, I think, because once again, you're trying to kill the person, but you have to be that person. So yeah, again, it's a good concept for a movie. I mean, It's by no means an amazing film, but it's still good.
It's an excellent action movie with an actual plot.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's everything we have to say about Face Off. Now, moving on to the next movie on the list, we're going to 1998. We have Blade. This movie's awesome. Well, first off, let's just talk about Wesley Snipes. I don't think anyone else could have ever played this role. I think he is so perfectly cast. He perfectly embodies the character.
Blade's probably my favorite superhero ever because I love everything about the character. The introduction of it, he's just so, it's like you feel for him and you struggle with it because here he is. He's like this sad story, but he's out there to try to help the human race. I don't know. I'm not explaining this well enough, but the burden that he has to carry as a person who is half vampire, half human.
Yeah, he's half the thing that he hates more than anything.
Yeah, and then that he has to go out and fight it. I know it's bad because it's, hi, the vampires take over. But from a superhero standpoint, I love that struggle with duality thing. And here's a guy that's half and half. He's fighting against what he is. It's so immersive, and I felt like this first film. I don't really care for the rest of the Blade movies. I just don't. But this movie was executed so well as far as learning about the quote-unquote culture of the vampires for the time.
Yeah, I'll have more to say about that later.
I know. But, it was, I felt as a first film in a series, they did a really good job of melding, meeting the character, getting the backstory. I felt like this was done really, really well. Again, this is a movie with the cast, again, was awesome.
And then, yes, you also have Stephen Dorff as Frost. And Stephen Dorff, he's awesome in this movie because he is such an asshole in this movie, but he's an entertaining because he's kind of charismatic at times. And he's also even he kind of brings an animalistic side to Frost too, which is kind of fun to watch. But he does that really well. He gives the role so much essence. So that's one of the things that works. And yeah, I think he's definitely, he's a standout in the movie.
He's the ultimate douchebag.
Yeah, he is.
That's I don't even know a better way to say it. He did so great. And as far as a character to dislike, I felt that's the key.
But at the same time, you just really can't look away from him because he's just so entertaining at the same time too.
Because that was the comedic aspect, I mean, I don't know. This movie for a quote unquote superhero movie, this movie has everything you want.
And it also has pretty good action too because, Wesley Snipes actually does know martial arts and you can definitely see him apply that to the movie. I honestly like fight sequences better when it's not just CGI all the time.
Or guys just laying around and falling over when the action hero, let's call him in this section, makes a move. You don't want to just watch a guy fall over. I mean, the fight scenes are fantastic.
It also has probably one of the best character introductions in any movie when Blade shows up at that vampire nightclub and we get everything that we need to know about Blade. And what's funny is because he's smiling for most of the time and you can just tell how much he enjoys it. And yeah, you just get everything you need to know from him in just the first 10 to 15 minutes.
He's the ultimate superhero.
He is pretty awesome, yeah.
And if you thought about it, and everybody, you said, hey, if you took a bunch of lists, I think a lot of people would pick Blade versus a bunch of other superheroes' attributes. I think there would be people that would pick Blade.
I will say this regarding what the plot of this movie is it a very deep plot? Not exactly. I mean, it's kind of I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not like a super deep type of movie by any means, but it's definitely got really cool elements to it because you have the whole vampire god element. There's also, this movie actually has a pretty good plot twist in it when we find out that Blade's mother has actually just been a vampire the entire time.
Yeah.
First time I watched this movie, I did not see that coming. I figured that she just died. And when she shows up, we find out she's actually been a part of Frost's coven the entire time. That's a really good twist. It's not a huge part, but it's definitely still effective. I kind of like that she doesn't redeem herself at the end. I like that Blade does kill her because I think that would have felt kind of cheap if she just automatically switched sides.
Yep. No, that was cool that she was saying, hey, you know what? I actually am evil,
Vampires are my people now. I've killed and I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it was Blade is the ultimate badass. He's the ultimate badass. There's no if you picked I don't know I would struggle to find another superhero that is a badass like Blade.
Well, and the other thing about Blade is he actually has a lot more personality. He
Mhm.
also has a sense of humor too, and that's something that I appreciate, and that's something Wesley Snipes does really well. So yeah, it's a really good movie. But it's still a film that I kind of struggle with at times when I watch it. Because here's the thing, we were talking about how it explores vampire culture. That's mainly in the first half because, we have Blade explaining it to Karen, or we have some of the other vampires talking about it. And it teaches us how vampires have been around for all these years and what their strengths and weaknesses are and how they have some kind of authority. My whole issue with this is, don't we already know this though? The movie doesn't really teach us anything new if you think about it. This is stuff we've seen so many different times before.
But as an origin story, people are trying to set what the rules are in this universe. I think that's what they're trying to do is say, look, the rules in the Bladeverse are this. So I think in an origin story, which this is, I feel like it's appropriate.
Is it an origin story though? Because Blade's Blade just right from the beginning.
Yeah, but while he's explaining all of the things with familiars and vampire culture and gods and all that kind of stuff, it lends it to be partially an origin story along with it. You do get to see Blade, as a baby and all that.
For a few seconds.
Yeah, but you know what? I think for what it was appropriate. It showed you just enough to say, hey, here's how we're doing it, and then move on with the story. And that's one of the things I did like about it too, is they didn't spend too much time.
It just jumps right into him being Blade, which is what I like, because if the first half was just him learning how to hunt vampires and everything, I don't think it would have been as exciting.
That would have been boring as shit.
Yeah.
Whereas when you jump right into the story and make it immersive, again, that's one of the things I like. They did a really great job with the movie. I don't know. I think Blade is probably the most badass superhero ever.
Yeah, and we were talking about Frost earlier. Despite how good Stephen Dorff is in the role, Frost as a villain and as a character, he's effective, but he's not really the most interesting villain because he wants to acquire the power of the blood god. He also wants to take over the world, just rule the humans. Is it an effective motivation? Sure. But if you think about it, it's not really a very deep motivation. And I know that you're not very fond of the sequels after this, but if you look at Blade 2, the movie with Jared Nomak and the whole Reaper strain, his motivation was actually a lot deeper because he wanted to seek vengeance on the vampires for turning him into what he was. That's a really interesting motivation for a villain. So that's one thing that made him stand out more for me. I don't think he's as good as Stephen Dorff was, but that's something I noticed because Jared Nomak as a villain was a lot more compelling than Frost was, but that's just my 2 cents on it.
I think it was a sign of the times. I think in the time, because we're talking about the late 90s, I think there was a push for villains to have a comedic side. And I think that was the thing with that because the goal was serious. You're trying to create a god, but at the same time, they tried to make him funny. He threw a bunch of little clip lines and stuff like that were funny. And I think that's just what it was. I think it was, again, sign of the times. Like I said, I loved him as the villain because he was funny. It added, I think the right word is levity. It added levity to the whole thing.
Yeah, there's even that one scene where he's talking with Quinn where he has Blade's sword. He goes, hold out your arm. And it looks like he's about to just cut off his arm. And he goes, no, just kidding. He's a villain with a personality, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that was the fun part about the movie. It's, I think I've said enough. It's one of those movies where, it really, as far as, characters, he's the ultimate badass from a sci-fi perspective.
Yeah, well, now that we're done talking about Blade, now we're going to move on to the final movie on our top 5 favorite action films, and that is going to be The Matrix from 1999. So, Dad, my question for you with this is, do you remember your experience when you first saw this movie? Did you see it in theaters, or did you wait till after it was released?
Oh, I can't remember. I think I saw this in a theater the first time.
Did you have high expectations when you watched it, or were you kind of just, I'll watch it, whatever?
I didn't even know what it was going to be about.
And I think that's probably the best way to watch this movie, because this is a very unique film. It's very original. It's very creative and everything. I think that's really the best way to go into this movie, not knowing anything about it, because again, it's a very inventive film. But yeah, it's got a great storyline. The characters are great, the performances are good, the action's incredible. You know what? Even some of the CGI really holds up pretty well.
Look, it's I've said this multiple times while we've been doing this, is a sign of the times. So someone your age, you've never lived a portion of your life without the internet. When you add someone like myself who's watching that movie in the 90s, when you go to watch that in the movie theater, you're thinking, there's no friggin' way the internet's ever going to be like this. There's no way. And, 25 years later, 26 years later, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, it was so crazy to think that you could make it so immersive. But it's written so well.
It is.
It's written so well. And look, I'm not generally the type of person who's looking for like super in-depth thing as far as a movie that I want to watch. I just want to be entertained. And this movie was amazing. I love when they pull you into a scene and then all of a sudden the scene just flies. It just flies and it's all over the place and you just want more. Every scene set up the next scene and made it, you were just begging for more.
Well, and kind of like what we were saying with Speed, it's another film that I think moves at a fast pace and it helps keep you invested. I mean, even when we're learning about what the Matrix is, we're still really invested. And honestly, this is kind of one of the reasons I prefer this over Blade, because the first half of this movie spends a lot of time diving into what the Matrix is and everything. With Blade, the first half was about what vampires are in their culture. Well, the thing is, in the Matrix, it teaches us stuff that we don't know, whereas with Blade, it teaches us stuff that we already know.
Yep.
So that's kind of how it is. And with the Matrix, it's fun to learn about stuff that you don't know. It's fun to learn about how humans are being used as batteries, how it's actually just a simulation the whole time.
For an origin story, it's probably the best ever written. And they did a great job of mixing present and past.
Yeah, and it also has, well, obviously we got to talk about the action sequences. The shootout with Neo and Trinity, and Neo's just flipping around, just shooting at him and everything. And it's funny because this is where you really can stretch reality, because everything's fake in the Matrix. You can totally stretch reality in this. You also have the fight between Neo and Morpheus in the sparring program, which is awesome.
That's the best part of the movie.
When he and Morpheus are fighting?
When Keanu is learning the rules and they're in the construct.
And he says, I'm trying to free your mind, Neo.
Yes. And when he's reaching out to him and he's like, do you think that's air you're breathing?
Yeah. Exactly.
All that stuff, all those little comments and all those things, because he was like, so you think that my speed here
has anything to do with my muscles in this place?
Yeah.
It's not real.
Yeah. And the whole goal of Morpheus was to liberate Neo's mind.
And Lawrence Fishburne is just awesome in the role. Also, Carrie-Anne Moss is great as Trinity. Also, I want to talk about Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith. So here's something that I like about Agent Smith. He's part of the machine. He's a character who's supposed to have no humanity to him whatsoever. Just like in the real world, the squiddies that are pursuing them, same thing with the agents, they're programs. But when you have Agent Smith, you get that one scene where he's talking with Morpheus and he's saying, I hate this place. I can't stand it.
It must be the smell.
Yeah, it must be the smell. You can tell, and I credit Hugo Weaving with this because he's really good in this scene. You can tell he is a program who has humanity. And not just a program, but he's a villain with humanity. He's not just, again, like I was saying, he's not just, I'm evil for the sake of being evil. He's a character with depth to him because he's not supposed to feel this way at all, but he does. So I think that that's an interesting motivation for him.
It's AI to the ultimate level. But think about the time. Think about right now. Think about right now that in the last couple of years, companies are just now developing AI, and you're talking about 26 years ago. Here is a film explaining it and delving into what it can and will be. That's the part that's probably the most interesting about it, and again, the characters in this, everybody was great. Like I said, I've said multiple times, I love character-driven movies.
I like character-driven too, but I also need some substance and plot when I watch stuff, and that's something that this movie delivers on.
And again, this is an origin story.
Kinda, yeah.
It really is, and they did such a good job. Like I said, as far as an origin story, this is probably the best one I've ever seen. Especially like an action, sci-fi-ish sort of movie.
Well, yeah, and also talking about some of the other characters, there's even a Cypher. If you think about it, he's kind of similar to Agent Smith in a way. You have him talking about this when he's on the phone with Trinity. He's saying, I'm tired, Trinity. I'm tired of this war, fighting, and all this. I just want to go back to how it used to be. He just wants to go back into the Matrix.
I just want to be a sheep.
And again, it's a villain who you hate him and you hate what he did to everybody, but you get his motivation in a way too.
Because you can say, hey, look, I can be this person who's in this ship and not, in the real world, if you will, or I can be a sheep that's just plugged in and everything's good. The Matrix is telling me that this steak is juicy and delicious.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't know any better, and he's okay with that.
Yeah. And actually, there is one scene in this movie that is the scene where Neo goes to visit the Oracle. I think it's a very well written scene and well acted because you have that moment where the Oracle is telling him, you got the gift and everything, but it seems like you're waiting for something. And she's absolutely right. He was. And at the end, when she tells him, with him and Morpheus, one of you's going to die, and who that is, it's going to be up to you. And ultimately, at the end, it's sort of the fulfillment of what she was talking about. He did make a choice and he did end up dying, but that's what he kind of needed to come back and become the one. And the way I always look at it is the Oracle, I think, knew right away that he was the one right as soon as he walked in, but she didn't want to tell him anything because she didn't want him to change his fate because she already knew what was going to happen. I really like that scene between the two of them.
Because she didn't want him to alter his decision making based on something she said.
Yeah.
Because there was that point when he goes, I'm not sure, and she's like, not that bright though.
Yeah.
I think it was right after she lit the cigarette, and he's like, what? And she's like, not that bright though.
Yeah, exactly.
So not aware of your surroundings. I think it was something to that. But yeah, like I said, from an origin story, this is a fantastic movie.
Well, and here's the other thing. Obviously, the sequels weren't as good as this one, but the thing that I've noticed is with a lot of franchises, sometimes if the sequels don't turn out as well as the original, it kind of impacts the legacy of what the first movie was. But the sequels have never had a negative impact on this movie. I can still watch this and just enjoy the hell out of it because it's so well done. And there are things I like about the sequels and things I don't like, but it's still a movie I can watch. And despite, where it eventually goes, it's still something that I can just enjoy no matter what.
The only one I didn't like was the last one.
You didn't like the third one either. Revolutions.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it's one of those things, I'm not a sequel person for the most part, but it doesn't take away from the first one for me because it was so good. And like I said, it's probably, for an action movie, it's probably one of the best done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually, come to think about that, just the way I want to wrap this up, of all the movies we've talked about, is The Matrix your favorite of them all?
Let's look at these.
Or at least your top two?
It's probably Blade first, Matrix second. Although I like Blade better, but The Matrix is a better movie.
Yeah, I get what you mean by that.
You know what I mean? I like Blade better because I like the story way better. But The Matrix is a much better movie from a filmmaking standpoint. But the story and the character, I love Blade of the movies we've talked about today.
Yeah, I think Blade would probably make my top two. Matrix is still probably my favorite. Matrix is honestly one of my favorite movies of all time. At this point, it's just such an incredible film. All right, guys. Well, I think that wraps up this discussion. Before we say goodbye, though, we just want to let you know there are a couple of honorable mentions that we weren't able to talk about, and those are Last Boy Scout, Independence Day, and Starship Troopers. If you haven't seen those, we recommend that you check them out soon. All right, well, Dad, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Had a great time.
Me too. All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys later.